Imagine an army that moves like a city on the road. A ribbon of men, animals, wagons, and craftsmen stretching until the horizon blurs. Imagine waking before dawn not to a casual stirring, but to a precise ritual. The scouts already astride, the centurion's horn about to cut the dark, the 8 men of a contubernium already folding their blankets in practiced hands. Why Roman soldiers were the most disciplined humans in history is a bold claim. It is also a claim that can be examined. Across documents, from Polybius's field observations to Vegetius' later handbook, the evidence points not to mythic heroism alone, but to a system, doctrine and routine, measurable practices and punishments that made Roman armies reliable in ways few ancient forces matched. Over the next hour, or however long you stay with this story, we will walk the line of the column, hour by hour, and see how discipline was engineered into habit, habit into performance, and performance into empire. Before the sun rises, Rome already has eyes on the road. The speculatores, light cavalry scouts and riders, are sent out first. They slip into the half-light to test the path ahead, listening for movement, checking bridges, noting choke points and possible ambush sites. Their reports shape the next decisions: route selection, pace for the day, where the new camp must be placed. According to Polybius, who observed Roman campaigns in the mid-Republican era, the use of scouts and the system of reconnaissance were not ad hoc, but systematic. Commanders relied on these early eyes to reduce uncertainty in movement. Imagine you are one of those scouts. The cold on your face, a horse's breath steaming in the air, every sound amplified. One misstep, and the entire day's plan could change. At home in the ranks, the routine is shared down to the smallest detail. A contubernium, typically 8 soldiers who share a tent and form the basic living unit, wakes together. They have a role assignment almost as fixed as a clockwork. Tents are folded and packed into the soldier's pack. Tools, shovels, pickaxes, stakes, and a set of poles are lashed and shouldered. Each man takes roughly the same load. Estimates suggest a legionary shouldered between about 20 and 30 kilograms of personal equipment on the march: weapons, armor, spare clothing, food rations, and the tools of fortification. That weight is not accidental. It is one of the simplest instruments of discipline. It forces soldiers to build endurance, to respect the economy of weight, and to travel with the things necessary to make the camp and defend it the moment they stop. A centurion's trumpet, a low metallic cornu, brings the column to life. The column sets off in a regulated manner: vanguard, main body, baggage train, rear guard. Pace is not arbitrary. Estimates suggest sustained daily movement ranged around 20 to 30 kilometers per day on campaign, depending on terrain and weather. That pace is a function of habit, training, and command. Veteran legionaries set the tempo. Less experienced troops are placed where protection is greatest. The column's width is kept deliberately narrow, often only 2 or 3 men abreast in tighter terrain, so that it can pass difficult roads, respond to orders quickly, and minimize straggling. Signals from mounted messengers and trumpets keep everyone synchronized. The result is predictability. The army moves as an organism, not a scatter of individuals. If you stand in the vanguard, your world is immediate and raw. The vanguard's duty is early warning, the first response to threats, the place where the army meets the unknown. It often includes veteran auxiliaries chosen for mobility and reconnaissance. Agrimensores, surveyors, ride with or just behind the scouts. Their task is to find and mark the ground that will hold the camp: firm soil for tents, drains for water, approaches for wagons, and defensible flanks. That combination of scouts and surveyors is crucial. A bad choice of ground turns a march into disaster. Frontinus, writing on military engineering and logistics, describes the importance of selecting sites that allow the army to turn defense into an advantage. The agrimensors' measurements, the scouts' reports, and the legatus's orders together decide where the army will make its ritual halt. The heart of discipline is division of labor. The main body of the column is not simply a mass of identical men. It is arranged so every role is known. Veteran legionaries hold the center and the most dangerous approaches. Recruits ride in guarded positions where examples of behavior are immediate and contagious. The baggage train, impedimenta, carries not only food and spare arms, but also craftsmen, blacksmiths, medics, carpenters, siege engines, and often the army's muleteers and servants. Estimates suggest a Roman marching force might include hundreds, if not thousands, of animals, mules, and pack horses, each carrying a share of the load. For a force the size of 2 legions plus auxiliaries, contemporary approximations suggest an entire marching column could involve 20,000 to 30,000 people and animals together. The logistics of moving such a body require rules, and those rules are discipline embodied. Control of the baggage train is sacrosanct. If the baggage train is routed, the army loses supply and often morale. That is why it is placed centrally or in guarded compartments, and why rear guards rotate to protect it. The rear guard is not a static afterthought. It is an instrument of enforcement. Rotations are regular so that no group grows complacent or exhausted. One detail among many showing how Roman commanders designed reliability into routine. One misinterpreted Latin term or a missed password at night could be the difference between stability and catastrophe. Thus, the tessera, or password system, becomes a matter of life and order. A tessera, sometimes a small tablet or token bearing a password, circulates among sentries and patrols to ensure identity and maintain silent security. The simple ritual of showing the tessera and knowing the countersign is another daily, mundane instrument of discipline. Discipline is visible in measurement. How far you must walk, how fast, how long to fortify a camp. Roman manuals and historians tell us that building a fortified camp after a day's march was not a leisurely chore, but a timed operation. The expectation, reflected in multiple sources and corroborated by archaeological evidence, is that a well-practiced unit could dig a ditch, build an earth rampart and stake palisades, erect tents in a standard layout, and establish gates and internal streets within about 4 hours. That figure, about 4 hours, is a meaningful benchmark in itself. It means an army can move by day, secure itself by night, and maintain a predictable rhythm. It turns survival into procedure. Midday on the march is a different kind of training. Breaks are short and organized. Engineers and servants attend to animals. Medics treat the minor wounds that accumulate from repetitive strain. Smiths mend straps and blades. There is no idleness that cannot be justified by immediate need. The column's musicians and trumpet calls again regulate the nonverbal grammar of movement. Halt, prepare camp, double time if necessary. Even during these pauses, the hierarchy of command manifests in small acts: who carries the water skins, how the cooking fires are distributed, which tents take priority. The legion's internal economy, who owes what in rationing, who is tasked with the latrine detail, is enforced by routine and habit as much as by threat. Silence itself becomes a tool. On certain marches, particularly in potentially hostile country, strict silence is enforced. Orders are given by signals rather than spoken commands to avoid betraying positions. Silence is disciplined. Quiet is not spontaneous. It is imposed and rehearsed. When the threat is low, the converse applies, the controlled chaos of camp life. Yet even there, every motion serves a purpose. Lines of tents follow a plan. Kitchens are sited where smoke can be channeled. Latrines are dug down gradient. Vegetius, writing in the later Roman period, insists that camp layout must be standardized so it may be built quickly and defended efficiently. Standardization is the enemy of confusion. The human costs of that system are not to be glossed over. Roman discipline included punishments that modern eyes find severe: flogging, reduction of rank, fines, or, in extreme cases, execution. Some measures, such as decimation, selecting 1 in 10 soldiers for execution after severe mutiny, are attested in sources but debated among historians as to frequency and exact procedure. Tacitus, in his accounts, records both the necessity of harsh measures and their use as examples to maintain order. It is important to separate admiration for the system's effectiveness from any romanticizing of brutality. Discipline produced cohesion and predictability. It also could instill fear. Ancient writers sometimes present punishment as a regrettable but necessary instrument of survival. When the column halts and the camp forms, the choreography is striking. The camp plan, the castra, is a compact city with order built into it. Streets run between rows of tents. The praetorium, or the general's tent, occupies the center. Gates are sited precisely for exit and control. Latrines and kitchens are placed in predictable positions, both for sanitation and efficiency. Work parties, organized groups formed within the contubernium and across centuries, dig the ditch and throw up earth into a rampart. Stakes are sharpened and erected at intervals. The ditch and rampart are physical metaphors of Roman discipline. A daily performance that once rehearsed could be executed like a military edict. Frontinus and Vegetius describe how speed and uniformity in this operation turn a temporary halt into a defensible fortress. Archaeology supports these descriptions, with traces of regular tent post placements and compacted internal roads found at many legionary sites. The tessera system at night is one more piece in the security puzzle. Guards rotate on a strict timetable. The watch schedule is a matrix of overlapping shifts to prevent fatigue and to ensure continuous vigilance. Sentries challenge with a password. Returning patrols respond with a countersign. This ritual reduces confusion and prevents accidental friendly fire. It is also a psychological mechanism. The repeated use of words and tokens binds behavior into confident expectation. Discipline in this context is ritualized identity, who belongs and who does not, reinforced by material tokens and audible countersigns. That combination of material and immaterial rules is part of what made Roman order resilient. Failures were instructive. The disaster in the Teutoburg forest in 9 CE is the most famous case. There, several Roman legions under Varus were ambushed in terrain unsuited to the column's method of movement and surprised by coordinated insurgent forces. Tacitus and later Roman historians treat Teutoburg as a lesson in the limits of organization. Doctrine that works on open roads and in predictable conditions can fail in constricted, forested terrain without secure reconnaissance, local support, and flexible tactics. The response to Teutoburg was not to abandon discipline, but to adapt it. New emphasis on scouting, tighter control of columns in difficult terrain, and shifts in strategy. That capacity to learn from catastrophic failures and incorporate those lessons into doctrine is itself an element of Roman discipline. A rigid routine that cannot change is brittle. A ritualized system that can be updated after painful losses is durable. The reforms of Gaius Marius in the late 2nd and early 1st century BCE provide another example of institutional adaptation. Marius opened recruitment to the capiticensi, the landless masses, which altered the social composition of the army and required new mechanisms of institutional cohesion. To integrate these recruits, Roman command introduced longer service terms, standardized equipment, and pay regularization. These reforms, while controversial in their time, created incentives and a bureaucratic spine that reinforced discipline through career structures and material reward. Estimates vary about the precise consequences, but most historians concur that Marius's changes contributed to a more professional, more institutionalized army, one where discipline was no longer only a cultural habit, but also embedded in an administrative framework. Discipline operates at both macro and micro levels, broad doctrines and daily minutiae. Consider the soldier's pack again. That 20 to 30 kilogram burden is not just physical training, it is a guarantee of self-sufficiency. Each man carries what is needed to fight, sleep, and fortify. The Army's doctrine expects each soldier to be his own engineer to an extent, to plant a stake, to shovel earth, to pitch a tent. That expectation reduces dependency on logistic tails in the short term and creates redundancy over the long term. Redundancy is another discipline mechanism. Carry spare parts, maintain multiple water sources, station craftsmen in the train. There is no single point of failure because responsibilities are spread across many small actors, each bound by role and routine. Tactical discipline manifests in formations too. Roman manipular and then cohortal formations are engines of control. In the march, the order of units, who walks where, which legion follows which standard, matters because it prepackages responses to common threats. If the enemy strikes on a flank, the column structure dictates which units are best positioned to pivot. That is not modern doctrine imposed anachronistically. It is a simple result of deliberate placement. Polybius notes that Roman formations were built for both flexibility and control. Formations transform the chaos of battle into a set of manageable variables. Discipline is the process of maintaining those variables within predictable bounds. Logistics is war's silent partner. If movement equals supply equals survival, the Romans treated logistics as a matter of strategic discipline. Food convoys, water points, field workshops, veterinary care for animals, all are planned. Frontinus and other writers emphasize water management. The engineer's role in ensuring that the marches could be sustained with adequate wells, cisterns, or access to rivers. The availability and movement of supplies dictated campaign tempos. Commanders who miscalculated were often punished by attrition rather than defeat on the field. Discipline in logistics is not glamorous, but it is fundamental. And Roman sources repeatedly point to the institutional attention paid to these mundane but vital operations. The human element in discipline deserves emphasis. Repetition breeds competence and trust. When a soldier knows that the camp will be built the same way every night, that ropes will be knotted the same way, that the command voice will use the same trumpet signals for specific actions, he moves less on impulse and more on learned patterns. That lowers the cognitive load in crisis and increases the army's capacity to act in concert. The centurion, the man who enforces discipline in the centuries, is crucial here. Charged with training and immediate discipline, centurions were the living hinge between policy and practice. They could punish, exhort, and exemplify. Vegetius points to the centurion's drill as central to maintaining that daily regime. It is the combination of small acts, rehearsed over weeks and months, that creates trust in the unit. Yet discipline was not merely punitive. There were incentives and social rewards too. Promotion, spoils distribution, and visible tokens of honor created a culture where compliance could also be rewarded. Soldiers who endured the burdens of the march received booty, land grants in some periods, or simply the respect of comrades. Institutional incentives coexisted with coercive measures, and that mix often produced a powerful motivational structure. Marius's reforms again illustrate this. By standardizing pay and career expectations, the army created a set of predictable benefits that reinforced obedience. When the night comes, the performance shifts, but it does not stop. Firelight reveals rows of tents, craftsmen hammering, cooks stirring rations, medics treating the small wounds that never vanish. The watch rotates, the tessera system circulates, and the perimeter is checked. Even the low murmur of voices in the camp is regulated. Loud cheers are discouraged, late-night wandering is punished. The night watch is as much about the prevention of indiscipline, mutiny, theft, desertion, as it is about defense. Discipline at night is an insurance policy. It preserves surprise for the army and uncertainty for the enemy. There are examples where that insurance failed. Aside from Teutoburg, there are recorded instances, by Josephus and others, of disciplined structures breaking down under extreme conditions, such as disease, poor leadership, or crushing supply shortages. The Roman system was not invincible, it was resilient. Resilience is the right word. Routines that can be counted on reduce the probability of systemic collapse, but they do not eliminate it. Historians debate the relative weight of structural factors versus situational contingency. It is fair to say both matter. The lesson Rome learned repeatedly was to institutionalize not only the forms of order, but also the ability to respond to its breach. So what makes this system qualify the Romans to be considered among the most disciplined humans in history? The answer is cumulative. Discipline was simultaneously technical. Weights, paces, camp times, organizational division of labor, role definition, rotation schedules, ritual, passwords, countersigns, standard layouts, and institutional career structures, reforms, engineering corps. Historical witnesses like Polybius describe doctrine and maneuver. Vegetius and Frontinus describe engineering, standards, and campcraft. Tacitus supplies the moral and social consequences of discipline and its breakdown. Josephus gives snapshots of logistics in action during rebellion. Collectively, these sources show a polity that treated discipline as both a military necessity and a civic practice. Comparisons to other ancient armies make the point clearer. Many armies of the ancient world relied on seasonal levies or ad hoc coalitions. Discipline tended to be situational, personal, or charismatic, dependent on the charisma of a leader or the urgency of a campaign. The Roman approach, by contrast, standardized training, equipment, and roles. That standardization made behavior repeatable and transferable across decades and commanders. Recruits learned a culture of expectation. The institution outlived individual egos. When judged by the criteria of scale, ability to move tens of thousands of people and animals, by enforceability, systems of punishment and reward, and by repeatability, standardized camp construction, marching order, and rota, the Roman case is persuasive. But the word most still carries weight. It is defensible only if one frames it carefully. The Romans were among the most disciplined in the ancient world when measured against specific verifiable metrics: marching paces, weights carried, speed of camp construction, systems of sentry control, and documentary testimony. That formulation sidesteps absolute superlatives and anchors the claim to evidence. It is also historically useful. It explains why Roman armies could sustain long campaigns, build roads and forts, and maintain cohesion across varied theaters of war. Discipline produced strategic options. A disciplined army that can march 20 to 30 kilometers a day, secure a defensible camp within 4 hours, and maintain a protected supply line can impose its will more reliably than a more spontaneous force. That reliability translates into operational reach. It allows for wintering cycles, for sustained sieges, for the steady extension of control across territories. Rome's empire building is not reducible to discipline. Politics, economy, geography all matter. But discipline is one of the mechanisms that made large-scale control feasible. As with any broad claim, there are limits. The Roman system required constant management, centurions and legati who could enforce rules, engineers who could survey and build, logistic officers who could feed and care for the column. It had cultural limits. Soldiers were not automatons, but men responding to incentives, fear, and loyalty. It could not prevent every disaster. But when the system worked, it worked in ways that produced measurable outcomes: fewer stragglers, rapid construction of fortifications, coherent response to threats, and the ability to sustain operations far from home. Imagine standing at the edge of such a camp as the last light fades. You see the neat rows of tents, the compact earthworks, the sentry at the gate with a tessera in hand. You hear the low, regulated murmur of men at work, and the occasional cornu that marks a change of watch. The scene reads like a composition in order and endurance. That composition is discipline turned into habit. If this kind of deep historical unpacking interests you, subscribe and stay with us. There are more episodes tracing how logistics, engineering, and routine shaped ancient war. In the end, the Roman soldier's discipline is best understood as a technology of habit. Tools, stakes, shovels, tesserae, combine with procedures, marching order, rota schedules, camp layouts, and institutions, reforms, career structures, engineering corps, to create a system where predictability becomes the army's greatest resource. The mosaic of discipline is not a single thing, but many small practices fused into a culture of readiness. Why Roman soldiers were the most disciplined humans in history is a defensible claim when framed as it has been here. Not as a boast about moral superiority, but as an argument grounded in measurable practices, documentary testimony, and observable outcomes. The march of a Roman army was not an accident. It was a ritualized performance refined over generations. That refinement allowed Rome to move, to fortify, and to project power in ways that few contemporaries could match. As night closes on our imagined camp, the watch continues. The tessera passes from hand to hand, the centurion inspects the rampart, and the cooks close off their fires. Discipline keeps the boundary between order and chaos finely drawn. It is uncomfortable and exacting, sometimes brutal, but it is also ingenious in its simplicity. Structure, repetition, and accountability made large, complex groups act with astonishing unity. If you want to keep exploring how specific doctrines and technologies shaped the ancient world, how siegecraft, road building, and supply lines turned campaigns into conquests, watch our next video on Roman siegecraft and engineering, and don't forget to subscribe.